This is WFYI News Now. It's December 23rd, and I'm Abriana Herron. On today's show, we'll find out what education issues lawmakers say they'll focus on during the upcoming legislative session. Indiana's unemployment rate remains above the national average. And a conversation at Purdue on how artificial intelligence could transform education.
To really substantially change the way we do education and learning for the first time in over 100 years.
Those stories coming up, but first. As lawmakers prepare to write a new budget, state agencies typically appear before the State Budget Committee to present funding requests. But as Indiana Public Broadcasting's Brandon Smith reports, this year's gubernatorial transition makes those presentations look different.
No state agency under the governor's office presented a funding request to the Budget Committee. Instead, they reviewed what the agency is doing with the money it received in the current budget. Still, there were hints as to where lawmakers might go in the upcoming legislative session. Republican Senator Chris Garton asked the Department of Health what role the state should play in addressing obesity, including through food assistance programs.
As a state, should we consider classifying different foods and/or vegetables that those benefits can be used for?
And Republican Senator Ryan Mishler discussed a request from the Department of Education on summer school.
We just need to be more efficient on where we prioritize the money and for which students.
A third of summer school costs are for physical education and health classes. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Brandon Smith at the State House.
Lawmakers gathered last week at the Indiana Convention Center to discuss their priorities ahead of the upcoming legislative session. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Kirsten Adair reports lawmakers plan to introduce education bills on school vouchers, early childhood education, school funding, and deregulation.
Republican lawmakers say they'll support universal vouchers for all students, regardless of family income. That's also one of Governor-elect Mike Braun's priorities. Representative Bob Baining says implementing universal vouchers will champion parents' rights to make decisions about their children's education.
I think letting parents make that choice is as to what's best for their son or daughter is the best way to move forward.
Baining also says he'll introduce a bill to deregulate education and lift some restrictions on teachers in schools. Democrats say they'll prioritize public school funding and early learning. Senator Greg Taylor says he will introduce a bill to lower the age required to enter school from 7 to 5. House Minority Leader Phil Giaquinta says he wants lawmakers to fund a robust pre-K program. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Kirsten Adair.
Indiana's unemployment rate for November stood at 4.4% for the second month in a row. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Tamoria Cunningham reports the rate is still above the national average.
New preliminary data shows the national unemployment rate for November stood at 4.2%, slightly lower than Indiana's. This time last year, the state's unemployment rate was 3.7%. Though the state's unemployment rate remains high, the percentage of working-age people in Indiana who have jobs or are actively looking for work increased to 63.4%, a measure that has increased for the fifth month in a row. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Tamoria Cunningham.
And for our final story today, Purdue University hosted its first ever Artificial Intelligence in Education conference earlier this year. WFYI's Lee Gaines spoke with Purdue professor Bill Watson, who organized the event, about how this new technology could transform the educational landscape.
Watson says as long as our society continues to collect vast amounts of data, artificial intelligence isn't going anywhere.
We as humans can't use the amount of data meaningfully that we're gathering, so we have to have computers to help us do that.
And he's optimistic about its potential to help both students and educators in preschool through 12th grade classrooms.
I think AI, more than any other tool that we've seen, grants us the sort of ability to leverage this tool to really substantially change the way we do education and learning for the first time in over 100 years.
Watson says AI could turn education from a one-size-fits-all approach into an experience that meets students where they are. Even so, he says students will always need the support of a human teacher. I'm Lee Gaines.
You can read a longer version of this interview at WFYI.org. And that's all for today's episode of WFYI News Now. Our podcast is produced by Drew Daudelin and Zach Bundy, with support from the news team at WFYI and public media journalists across the state. Our news director is Sarah Neal-Estes. Kendall Antron produced our music, and I'm your host, Abriana Herron. If you like today's episode, remember to subscribe and share, and follow WFYI on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube to check in on our newsroom throughout the day. Thanks for listening, and happy holidays. We'll be back on Thursday.